The royal family has always been surrounded by mystery, but few scandals have captivated the world as much as the tumultuous marriage between Princess Diana and Prince Charles. Behind closed doors, many arguments erupted. Their relationship was far from a romantic fairy tale. But what if I told you that new letters from Prince Philip to Diana have recently leaked, revealing explosive secrets about the royal couple and their troubled relationship? Let's dive into the revelations these letters disclose and untangle the complex dynamics between Diana, Charles, and Philip, a fairy tale that never truly was. When Charles and Diana first met, the entire world was fascinated. Their relationship began quietly, but as soon as the news broke, the media pounced. Everywhere, newspapers, magazines, and television channels portrayed the story as a romance worthy of the most beautiful fairy tales. But guess what? Prince Philip's secret letters to Diana reveal something entirely different about King Charles. However, before diving into these revelations, let's go back to the beginning of this story to understand how Philip became entangled in his son's marriage. Diana was introduced as a shy and innocent young woman, ready to enter the world's most famous royal family. Yet, while everything seemed magical on the surface, there were already signs that things weren't as perfect as they appeared. Charles, under pressure to find a wife, saw Diana, who came from a noble family, as the ideal candidate. However, their relationship lacked depth. They had spent very little time together before getting engaged. For Diana, the sudden attention that came with entering the royal family was overwhelming. Before her relationship with Charles, she led a quiet life as a kindergarten teacher in London. Suddenly, she found herself under the global spotlight, where every move, every word was scrutinized. She had to be perfect, act perfectly, and fit into a royal family steeped in centuries-old traditions. Diana's life changed overnight. The public adored her, and every appearance was met with cheers and admiration. But behind her warm smile, Diana already felt the heavy weight of expectations that would follow her for the rest of her life. On July 29, 1981, the world gathered to witness what was called the wedding of the century. Around 750 million people watched Diana walk down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in a dazzling dress with a 25-foot train. It was a moment filled with grandeur, tradition, and royal splendor that the world would remember for years to come. But behind the glamour, the reality was much more complex. Charles and Diana were already facing issues that would soon become public knowledge. Their personalities couldn't have been more different. Diana was warm, sensitive, and craved affection, while Charles was introverted, intellectual, and more reserved. And let's not forget their age difference. At barely 20 years old, Diana was still discovering who she was, while Charles, at 32, had already lived a much fuller life, shaped by royal duties, long-standing friendships, and the expectations of being a future king. However, one of the greatest challenges in their relationship was Charles's ongoing friendship with Camilla Parker-Bowles, a woman with whom he had had a romantic relationship years earlier. Even as Charles stood at the altar beside Diana, Camilla's shadow loomed over their marriage. Many didn't know at the time, but Camilla would remain a central figure in Charles's life, casting a shadow over his relationship with Diana and the rest of the royal family. From the beginning, cracks were already forming in Charles and Diana's relationship. Charles remained close to Camilla, and Diana, young and inexperienced in royal life, began to feel uncomfortable with their bond. Her insecurity only grew after their wedding, as Charles continued to spend time with Camilla, fueling rumors that would later shake the very foundations of their union. For Diana, the pressures of royal life only added to her personal struggles. She felt isolated within the royal family, unable to confide in anyone about the overwhelming reality she was facing. Although the public adored her, Diana often felt alone and misunderstood. The royal family, bound by traditions and formalities, lacked the tools to handle her emotions, which clashed with Diana's need for closeness and warmth. On top of that, Diana began to struggle with her mental health. The constant pressure to appear perfect in public, while grappling with her personal doubts and marital issues, took a devastating toll. Diana later revealed that during this period, she suffered from bulimia, a response to the crushing stress she faced. The royal family, rooted in tradition, didn't know how to address her struggles, leaving Diana feeling even more isolated. As she so poignantly said herself, "I was always on someone else's agenda." Her life seemed to revolve around others' expectations, being a royal icon, a mother, a wife, while rarely being asked what she needed. The media played a huge role in exposing these cracks. Rumors about Charles and Camilla's relationship spread like wildfire, and the public began to realize that something wasn't right. In a now famous moment that shocked the world, Diana confirmed these suspicions during her 1995 Panorama interview. When asked about Charles's relationship with Camilla, Diana candidly stated, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." This simple yet devastating remark perfectly captured the essence of Diana's struggle. She had never truly been alone in her marriage to Charles. Camilla's presence loomed large, and Diana felt it deeply. Despite their efforts to maintain the appearance of a happy marriage in public, the emotional rift between Charles and Diana continued to grow. Camilla remained a major source of tension in their relationship. As Charles grew closer to Camilla, Diana felt increasingly isolated, not just from her husband, but from the entire royal family. The warmth and affection she had hoped to find within the royal household were scarce. As a young woman under the immense pressure of royalty, Diana felt alone in a family bound by tradition and emotional restraint. To make matters worse, the media's obsession with Diana grew by the day. On the surface, she was the people's princess, adored by millions. But this constant attention weighed heavily on her. Every gesture, every movement was reported, criticized, and dissected by the tabloids, putting enormous pressure on her to appear perfect at all times. While the public couldn't get enough of her image, Diana felt suffocated. Diana also struggled with her mental health during these difficult years. The pressure to conform to royal expectations, coupled with the deterioration of her marriage, had a significant impact on her emotional well-being. Behind closed doors, Diana battled bulimia and depression. Her bulimia, a secret kept for many years, was both a response to the stress she felt and a cry for help in a world where she had few people to turn to. She later described this disorder as a form of control in a life where everything else seemed chaotic. Despite these struggles, Diana found solace in her public life, particularly through her charitable work. She devoted herself to causes close to her heart, including raising awareness about HIV and AIDS, landmine clearance, and helping children in need. These engagements gave her a sense of purpose and connection that was lacking in her marriage and within the royal family. It was in these moments, visiting hospitals, comforting the sick, and speaking on behalf of the marginalized, that Diana truly shone. But this also set her apart from the rest of the royal family, which focused more on maintaining a certain image than on actively engaging with the public on emotional issues. Diana's natural empathy and ability to connect with people made her a global icon, but it also deepened the divide between her and the royal family, particularly with King Charles. As the public's adoration for her grew, Diana felt increasingly alienated from the institution to which she belonged. She even once said that she was supposed to be the people's princess, but she felt like the princess of no one. Can you imagine the reaction when she revealed such a heavy truth? Perhaps that was precisely the reason why Lady Di started receiving letters from her father-in-law, Prince Philip, in the first place. But there was much more to it than initially met the eye. As Diana's struggles became more visible, Charles's response to their declining marriage took a different path. In public, Charles maintained a composed and controlled image. He continued to fulfill his royal duties and appear at public events alongside Diana, even as their relationship crumbled behind closed doors. To the outside world, he presented himself as a devoted prince, but his private life told a different story. Privately, Charles's bond with Camilla only grew stronger. Despite media pressure, he continued to confide in her, finding in Camilla the emotional support that was lacking in his relationship with Diana. This deepening connection with Camilla further distanced Charles from Diana, creating a sense of emotional abandonment that Diana felt intensely. The more time Charles spent with Camilla, the more alienated Diana became. The royal family had its own way of handling these issues by keeping everything private. Emotional struggles were rarely discussed openly, leaving Diana feeling even more isolated. There was no guidance or support from the family, no one to turn to for advice or comfort. Charles and Diana's public appearances also became increasingly tense. Behind the smiles intended for the cameras, there was a growing disconnect between the two. Their body language at events often spoke volumes, revealing the tension simmering beneath the surface. To many observers, it was clear that something was wrong. But for years, the couple tried to maintain appearances in the name of the royal image. Diana's growing alienation, both from her husband and the royal family, would play a central role in the unraveling of their marriage. As Charles increasingly turned to Camilla for support, Diana found herself fighting battles on multiple fronts, against the royal family, the media, and her own emotional struggles. This period marked the beginning of the end of this fairy tale, as the cracks in their relationship became impossible to ignore. The mediator and the crisis family member, Prince Philip, often perceived as the stern patriarch of the royal family, had a much closer relationship with Princess Diana than many imagined. From the outside, Philip appeared straightforward and blunt, with a reputation for making offhand remarks that sometimes sparked controversy. However, behind this gruff exterior, he had a deep commitment to his family and the monarchy, which drove him to take a more personal role in Diana and Charles's troubled marriage. In the early stages of Diana and Charles's marriage, it became clear that things were not going well. The royal family was no stranger to internal tensions, but the issues between Diana and Charles were not easily ignored. Seeing the difficulties his son and daughter-in-law faced, Philip took on the role of mediator. He believed that with the right guidance, Diana and Charles could resolve their differences and save their marriage. Philip's experience in his own marriage to Queen Elizabeth had shaped his view of the situation. Like Diana, Philip had once been an outsider within the royal family. He had to adapt to the pressures of royal life and the strict expectations that came with being part of the British monarchy. Over the years, Philip had learned to navigate his role as consort to the Queen, giving him a unique perspective on the challenges Diana faced. He understood the emotional toll that public scrutiny could take and recognized the challenge of finding one's place within the royal institution. Although Philip could be direct, he genuinely cared for Diana. He empathized with her struggles and saw her as a key figure in the future of the monarchy. But more importantly, he knew that the stability of the royal family was at stake. The world was watching closely, and any scandal surrounding Diana and Charles's marriage would undoubtedly tarnish the monarchy's reputation. For Philip, maintaining family unity was not just about personal feelings. It was about protecting the crown itself. Philip's involvement in Diana and Charles's marriage was motivated by his desire to keep the royal family intact. He had always been fiercely protective of the monarchy and knew that a public collapse of this marriage would have serious consequences. For a time, Philip genuinely believed he could help Diana and Charles reconcile. He often acted as a mediator, trying to bridge the gap between them and offering advice on how to make their marriage work. However, over the years, Philip's frustration grew. Despite his efforts, the rift between Diana and Charles continued to widen. Charles remained emotionally attached to Camilla, and Diana, feeling increasingly isolated, struggled to cope with her role within the royal family. Philip's attempts to maintain peace became increasingly difficult, as Diana and Charles seemed to drift further apart. Although Philip remained committed to helping them, it became clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. Eventually, even Philip had to accept that the marriage was irretrievable. While he continued to empathize with Diana, he recognized that the pressure on the family and the monarchy was becoming too great. As much as he wanted to protect the royal image, the reality of the situation could no longer be ignored. By the early 1990s, the problems between Diana and Charles had reached a breaking point. The media was constantly reporting on their marital issues, and the public was deeply invested in the drama. In 1992, the couple officially announced their separation. This marked the beginning of one of the most dramatic periods in modern royal history, with constant media attention surrounding both parties. The royal family, known for keeping its affairs private behind closed doors, was now facing a total public crisis. As the public watched the marriage collapse behind the scenes, the royal family worked hard to contain the damage. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were particularly concerned about how this separation would affect the monarchy's reputation. For decades, the royal family had carefully cultivated its image, and a public scandal involving the future king was a serious threat. Philip, in particular, was privately worried about the growing impact of the scandal on the royal family's status. His letters reveal his deep concern about the public perception of the monarchy and how this personal issue had become a global spectacle. He knew that every detail of the separation would be dissected by the press, and he feared the long-term consequences for the monarchy. One of the key factors that made this crisis even more difficult for the royal family was Diana's relationship with the media. Unlike other royal family members, Diana had a unique ability to use the media to her advantage. As the people's princess, she had a direct connection to the public and was not afraid to share her perspective. In the Panorama interview, for example, Diana openly discussed the problems in her marriage, her struggles with mental health, and Charles's relationship with Camilla. This was a shocking moment for the royal family, which had always valued privacy and discretion. But for Diana, this interview was a way to take back control of her narrative and show the world what she was going through. For Philip and the Queen, the interview was seen as a direct challenge to the monarchy's privacy. The royal family had always operated under the belief that its personal affairs should remain private, and Diana's decision to speak so openly was viewed as a violation of this unwritten rule. Philip, in particular, was frustrated by how many of the family's internal dynamics were now exposed to the public eye. The interview intensified the media frenzy surrounding Diana and Charles, making it almost impossible to manage the scandal. After years of public and private tensions, Diana and Charles's divorce was finalized in 1996. The emotional toll on both parties was undeniable. For Diana, the divorce marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in her life, but it also allowed her to regain control over her personal life. For Charles, the divorce allowed him to pursue his relationship with Camilla more openly, although it would take years for the public to fully accept her role in his life. The divorce was the final chapter of one of the most turbulent periods in modern royal history. It marked the end of the fairy tale marriage and the beginning of an uncertain new era for the royal family. Throughout all of this, Prince Philip's role as both mediator and protector of the crown had a lasting impact on how the family navigated this very public crisis. But was there something more? An unexpected ally. In an extraordinary move, the Duke of Edinburgh made the uncommon decision to write private letters to Diana, offering her advice and support during some of her darkest moments. But guess what? Prince Philip's secret letters to Diana have recently leaked, also revealing secrets about King Charles. In one of his letters to Diana, Philip expressed his disagreement with Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker-Bowles, deeming Charles ridiculous for risking everything with her. In another letter, he stated that the family did not approve of either party having lovers, reflecting his frustration with the behavior of both Charles and Diana, while notably criticizing his son's actions. Although he could be stern, these letters reveal that Philip empathized with Diana's situation more than the public ever realized. Charles and Diana's divorce in 1996 was one of the most publicized scandals in royal history. While Queen Elizabeth remained neutral, doing her best to preserve the royal family's image, Philip was torn. His loyalty to the monarchy was absolute, but privately, he maintained communication with Diana, expressing concern for her well-being. He recognized that Lady Di, despite her own imperfections, had been wronged by Charles's long-standing affair with Camilla, and he feared for her safety, suggesting that Diana's fears were not unfounded. But what did he mean by that? According to some reports, it turns out that one of those letters confirms what we have all suspected from the beginning. King Charles wanted Diana out of the way and even considered plotting something against her, which could have easily led to his arrest and imprisonment. Furthermore, sources have claimed that he could still be arrested due to what these letters reveal. Just imagine the tears and sadness on his face if that were to happen. But that's not all. Sources have also stated that Philip's letters referred to his relationship with Diana's sons, Princes William and Harry. The Duke was very close to the two boys and knew how the deterioration of their parents' marriage would affect them. In his correspondence, he often spoke of the need to protect William and Harry from the media storm surrounding their family. This concern was also shared by Diana, who was fiercely protective of her children throughout her life. The relationship between Philip and Diana was not always easy. They had their differences, and Philip did not always agree with how Diana managed her public life. However, his letters suggest a man who was trying, in his own way, to keep the family united and help Diana weather the storm. While Charles leaned heavily on Camilla during this time, Philip's private support for Diana helped her navigate some of the most difficult years of her life. It is therefore fair to say that Prince Philip's efforts to support Diana were not just a matter of personal loyalty. They aimed to protect the institution to which he had dedicated his life. By siding with Lady Di, he hoped to keep the family intact for the sake of William, Harry, and the future of the monarchy. His letters, now made public, reveal a man who, despite his stern appearance, stood by Diana in her most difficult hours. But what about Charles? Well, sources close to the palace say that after hearing this, the king broke down in tears. Is it possible that King Charles is indeed responsible for Diana's death? Share your thoughts in the comments.